Well, hello and good morning. Thank you so much, Board Member Delatorre. I know this is such an important vision for you of how to get to 800 uh, drayage trucks or really regional heavy haul zero emission trucks. And I am honored and pleased to be here this morning, both for myself and for CalSTART, to be a part of this forum for Project 800 and its launch today with this aggressive goal. What I'd like to do is to walk through this context that this is not just a California issue that we are dealing with, but very much California is ground zero or the epicenter of a worldwide movement to push towards zero emission in commercial vehicles. And we have formed a program that is actually helping to drive that faster that I'd like to walk you through very quickly. So if you will hang with me, we will launch some slides here. And I'd like to talk about the global commercial Drive to Zero program, because Drive to Zero did launch from California's efforts. And really, we launched a couple of years ago at the Global Climate Action Summit that Governor Jerry Brown was very instrumental in forming. And this really launched a campaign that is bringing together stakeholders from around the world to align around these same aggressive goals and outcomes that California is focused on. So we will move into first just looking at the exciting time that we are in. And Board Member Delatorre referred to this, but we are seeing a fundamental sea change in commercial vehicles in terms of the technologies powering them. We're certainly seeing this in the range of delivery vehicles. There's exciting both legacy players coming into the market and brand new born EV players coming into the market as well, such as Rivian, Arrival, and Bollinger. And then, of course, Ford moving into the marketplace by 2022, as will Mercedes-Benz. Even more exciting, though, is we're seeing the rise of capability move into the heaviest class of vehicles in our urban regions, which will also soon be driving along interstate corridors on point-to-point long-haul corridor routes. But first in our urban regions, we're seeing these Class 8 trucks. Volvo has launched production of their VNR. BYD has been in production of their Class 8 TT. Peterbilt soon to be in production. Lion starting to move that direction, and many others. This is an incredibly exciting space to be in. Now, we know the reasons for it. We've heard about it in California, but these are global problems that we're facing. Fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions are going to be growing fourfold out of the transportation sector. And the biggest and fastest growing sector is really commercial vehicles, particularly goods movement in our urban regions. And we are becoming an increasingly urbanized world. Looked at another way, you can see not just the greenhouse gas emissions and fuel consumption, but look at the urban pollution, nitrogen oxides, particulates. These are issues of tremendous urban health, and particularly for impacted communities, disadvantaged communities, frontline communities, people who have borne the brunt of these emissions for far too long. And there is a tremendous push where we need to address this now. It's augmented and exacerbated to a great degree by what we've also seen coming out of COVID, an acceleration of e-commerce, which has meant even more deliveries into our urban regions and a whole change in the pattern of how those vehicles are moving freight between distribution centers and stores and large warehouse facilities. Just about 4 years ago, we started really working even more deeply with CARB. For the last 10 years, we've operated the HVIP program for incentives for this space. But we started a 3-year investment strategy process as the technical advisors to the Air Resources Board to look at what were the timelines for technologies. When would they become available? What classes of vehicles would they be available for? And how could we speed that impact? We created what's known as a Beachhead Strategy, really looking at where are the first markets of success for zero emission commercial vehicles, and then how could they and would they grow to successively larger and more impactful markets to get the volumes to larger sizes as well as the emissions down. What we saw was that there was definitely a very much of a wave function to this. As the technology started to move through those classes where the business case was strongest first and where fleets could use the technology into heavier and larger and more demanding applications. Looked at in a slightly different way in this wave function, you can start to see the types of vehicles we're already seeing move out onto the road and those that will be coming in just the next 1 and 2 years into the marketplace. We're about between wave 3 and 4 now on this chart. And what's exciting about it is that as we start to build these economies of scale, as we get to larger and larger market spaces, we start to drive down costs. But this can't happen only in California. Now, what we are seeing is that it's very capable of change because of the fundamental nature of zero-emission technologies. These components actually are highly transferable between not only different classes of vehicles, but different applications. And we've seen a lot of the early success from transit. Those same underlying components are now being used in delivery trucks, in regional heavy haul trucks, even into off-road vehicles and into the marine sector. So we see that the technology is highly capable, but it's not going to happen in a vacuum. There are still a number of barriers where we actually need to take active steps for it to happen, to address high vehicle cost, infrastructure, the access to charging, and also fleet awareness, and anything that we can do to actually address the fuel prices and that upfront cost are going to be huge. This is what launched our Global Commercial Vehicle Drive to Zero program at GCAS a little over 2 years ago. It was built around the idea that we need to build an alignment, not just in California, but in other first mover regions globally, to take on setting up ecosystems of success that would target the right vehicles and the right timeline and the right applications, that would build the supporting ecosystems of policies, infrastructure, investments, and incentives to encourage faster adoption, and then to share rapidly lessons from around the world on what was going on and why these technologies could take off and how we could adjust our strategies. We really have focused the Global Drive to Zero program, which now has more than 100 global stakeholders, 9 of them nations, to really target these key areas. So if California was starting to move the component marketplace, as you can add volumes from China, Western Europe, Canada, increasingly South America and into India, all of a sudden you're starting to have a huge multiplier effect, both on the supply chain and the economics, but also on jobs and the efficacy of using these technologies. We're really excited that during this past year, the Global Drive to Zero program has been recognized by the Clean Energy Ministerial, which is 25 of the largest nations and their energy programs. We are now an officially recognized campaign of CEM. And through that effort and the 9 nations that actually have joined, we're taking a really close look at the ACT program, the Advanced Clean Truck Rule. There's tremendous interest in what California is doing with that, and how can that become a measuring stick for the world? So in addition to the 15-state memorandum of understanding that is now underway, the Global Drive to Zero program has taken on a global MOU to bring the ACT goals and potentially rules to other nations of the world to have the same timeline, the same targets, the same investments. So we're working with China, Western Europe, parts of the US, Canada, and elsewhere to expand these rules and their adoption so that we have similar timelines, pushing the same aggressive outcomes for climate change and urban air quality worldwide. We have actually refined the Drive to Zero goals to add the 2030 and 2050 targets that are already built into the ACT program. And the 2035 midterm target for drayage is something that we'll be working with global nations on. To help assist that, of course, we need people to have the right tools to be able to make these choices, to put the right investments in place, and to make sure that infrastructure is moving forward as quickly as needed. So we've developed a number of tools that are available online, not just domestically, but for all of our global partners. And this includes a Zero Emission Technology Inventory, or ZETI as we call it. We're now monitoring more than 300 different zero-emission commercial vehicle platforms across the world. And currently we're measuring these in Europe, North America, and China. Model availability is increasing rapidly. It's an incredibly exciting time. We think this, based on the projections we're getting from global manufacturers, should double in terms of numbers of available vehicle types across multiple applications by 2023. Huge growth in the medium duty truck space, but also a really big growth into that Class 8 tractor space, which is really the biggest fuel user, the biggest emitter, and the biggest impact on our urban regions. Now, of course, infrastructure is becoming one of the big targets. We're seeing the manufacturers starting to move out and bring products to the market. Will we move infrastructure quickly enough? One of the things that we've been doing is sharing global guides. Part of them developed out of tools that we've developed for the HVIP program here in California, but if you will, refined by what we're learning from global partners. There's a number of really interesting projects and work underway, whether it be in China, Western Europe, or elsewhere, where people are also looking at these same problems and starting to come up with solutions that we can learn from. So just as we can share HVIP solutions worldwide, we're finding that we can learn from some of the best practices elsewhere in the world. One interesting project going on right now in Western Sweden is to develop regional fast charge hubs that can be used by both transit buses, commercial vehicles on their route structures, as well as passenger cars for really rapid charging for light duty vehicles, all using the same infrastructure, but just having different access gates to drive into it. These are some of the worldwide lessons we need to be looking at very closely in California. But what needs to happen next? We really do need to be focusing on how we can build these ecosystems of success. Now, the nation states have a big role to play. And of course, with the election that we've just had and the inauguration yesterday in this country, there are opportunities anew for the United States to take a more active role. And we are fighting very hard with more than 50 partners in the truck, infrastructure, and component system ecosystem to fight for zero emission incentives at the federal level and more investment in infrastructure at the federal level. But for all nation states and subnational entities, such as provinces and states, we really need them to take aggressive action on incentives, but also on regulations. And so really following the ACT guidelines, which was really built on the framework of what was possible in the Beachhead Strategy of change, is something that we want to see embedded throughout the world so that we can get aligned on our targets, so that manufacturers can get clear signals about what kind of vehicles will be required and needed on what timelines. Cities too can actually set in place some really important factors to support this. Utilities and fuel providers need to be big players in this space and start investing forward so that we can have the recharging and hydrogen refueling infrastructures that we will need, both for our regional build-outs and then connecting regions through fast charge corridors or refueling corridors between cities, and build this out. Finally, fleets need help to see how this can actually be a positive business case for them and get assistance with their first, to be able to get their first vehicles on the road. That's why incentive programs such as HVIP, or in the off-road space, CORE, programs to put in infrastructure, such as the California Energy Commission is doing. These need to not only be built out strongly in California, but they need to become models that other regions can actually adopt and use the same kinds of tools so that we can adopt these goals together. If we can build the volumes, not just in California, not just on the East Coast or some states in the Midwest, but in Western Europe, in China, India, and South America at the same time, we will have a demand for millions of these vehicles. And the component sets that go with that will lead to huge amounts, not only of jobs, but a steady supply chain that will lead to much lower costs and faster adoption as we head towards 2030. So it is an exciting time that we're in. The Global Drive to Zero program is growing as quickly as what we're seeing in California in terms of the adoption of the ACT rule. We want to continue to work with regional, state, and global partners to take the success we're seeing in California and this aggressive action out to the world. So with that, I'm so pleased to have been here this morning. And now I have the honor of handing off to a great colleague and friend who I've worked with for years, Mike Roth, who is the Executive Director of NACFE, the North American Council for Freight Efficiency. Mike, I'll hand it over to you.